I'm Idiotech, and this is my March 2017 Q&A. Now, if you want to submit a question for next month's Q&A video, you can do so in the comments section below this video. Just leave your question, and I will do my best to answer it. If you're a Patreon supporter, head on over to Patreon. You'll find a post there where you can submit your question for next month's Q&A video as well. So without further ado, let's get into the Q&A. The footage in the background is from Viscera Cleanup Detail, a very interesting game that I've been playing recently. Okay, so the first question comes to us from Joe Gestrup. Considering your background in video game development, I was wondering what knowledge or skill sets you found most useful during your time on YouTube. Interesting question. The ties between the two things are not as strong as you may think. I understand how games work. I made them. But I'm by no means like an expert in game design or an expert in engine tech or anything along those lines. I was an indie developer, I made games, I wrote my own engine with a colleague, and we made games in that engine. So I understand development, I understand the process, I understand a lot of the business end of things, having to interact with publishers, having to deal with customers, having to resolve problems, having to deal with services like Steam. I understand a lot of stuff about those things. I also understand some PR techniques that I can notice and go, okay, that's actually not true. What they're trying to say is this. So I know a lot of things inside info, but it's honestly not that useful. One thing that is good is that I can see things within games that maybe other people doing this cannot see. I can see if a developer's being lazy with a system or a user interface element. I can see things like that. I can see how easy it would be to fix certain bugs. I can see problems coming before other people might see them. For example, with The Division, I pointed out a number of times that there was going to be hacking issues in that game due to the way the engine was handling its client-side data, and when it released, it was a complete mess. So I do get some insight. Another thing that's good about it is I know how to talk to developers, so it makes getting code from them a little easier. In terms of video editing, sound design, marketing, in terms of building an audience on YouTube, there's not a lot of cross-pollination between the two things, but a very interesting question nonetheless. Thank you very much. The next question comes to us from Mac. Do you reckon the business side of the industry is ultimately incompatible with its creative side, and whether the conflict between them will ever be resolved? If so, in what ways? So I have kind of an interesting perspective on this compared to most people, I think. Having worked in the industry, having worked under a publisher, I did run into problems. I had publishers saying things like, why don't you cut this out of the game and we can sell it as DLC later? I've dealt with things like that. So there are problems, and publishers do have a tendency to intervene in the creative process. I don't agree with that, and I think that's a problem. I think publishers need to trust their creative talent a lot more than they currently do, especially at big companies. That being said, creative people have a tendency to get bored, to get sidelined, to start fixating on specific ideas or projects, and it's good and important to have someone there to rein them in, to remind them of the deadlines, to remind them that they only have a limited amount of money. I think that's very important. So I think it's a necessary evil, and I really don't think there's ever going to be a situation in which it can be resolved unless every studio becomes independent in some way. Publishers have the money, and that's the reality of the situation. If I want to make a project, I need to go to a publisher and say, can I have some money, please? Now, we have alternatives like Kickstarter and GoFundMe and all these things, and they're cool, but you see what happens when you give creative people money. Look at Double Fine, for example. They massively mismanaged their budgets. They had to continually ask for new money. They ended up releasing half a game. There was a ton of problems. They shut down games that they couldn't end up finishing. So if you look at Double Fine as an example of what happens when you give creative people money and they have no responsibility with that money other than to the customer, you kind of get a clusterfuck. They didn't manage that situation well at all, and people now have a very negative perception of Double Fine, whereas previously, people held up Tim Schafer as a god of gaming. I think publishers are necessary. I think they suck. I think they intervene way too much, but I think they're necessary, especially when it comes to big projects with lots of money involved and lots of people involved. I just wish they would keep their noses out of the creative process a little bit more than they do. Interesting question, thank you for that. The next question comes to us from Paradox. Regarding your regular reviews, will you always do them in the 15 to 20 minute format, or will you be looking at longer form reviews for some games? Okay, I try and keep my videos short for two reasons. One, audience retention is kind of important. Making very long videos, in my case at least, people tend not to want to watch them. There's another reason though, and that is that I want people to actually watch what I'm making. I spend a lot of time doing video editing. I spend a lot of time processing my audio and making sure I've said the right things and doing a lot of research and playing these games meticulously to try and get the information correct, to try and present my opinion in the most fair way possible. Now, the longer the review goes, the harder it becomes to make reviews in an efficient way, and you might have seen recently that my videos are taking longer and longer to make, and that's because my production values are going up and up and up. And there's a cost-benefit analysis thing that I need to do there, where I need to say to myself, okay, do I really need to spend 60 hours on this one video? Would it be more beneficial to spend that 60 hours on 3 videos? And the answer is usually yes. So I don't want to make extremely long videos, because I'm worried that people will just not listen to what I'm saying and put it on in the background while they're playing World of Warcraft. And that's not what I want to do, because I'm trying to actually inform people of something. And, you know, I understand there are many channels out there who rely on that long-term audience retention, big long videos. And that style's fine, I have no problem with it. But I actually want people to listen to what I'm saying, because I have to put a lot of work into these reviews. If it was a first impressions video and it was 30, 40 minutes long, and I was just talking over some gameplay, that would be a different story, because there's a lot less effort required in making those videos. But in my last video, I think there was 40 plus edits. And when I'm putting that much work into a video, I kind of want you to watch it. So the shorter it is, the greater the chances are that someone's actually going to sit there and watch through the whole thing. So that's why they're, I guess, short comparatively when you look at someone like Total Biscuit. However, I think it's a good time, and I tend to spend the amount of time on a game that it needs. If a game requires a lot of commentary, I will do that. You know, you go look at my Deus Ex review or my No Man's Sky review. They're quite long, and that's because I had a lot to talk about. In other cases, I can cover a game in 5 to 10 minutes because there really isn't that much depth. So, if you're looking for longer form content from me, I think you'll be pleased with my new series that I'm going to be starting up, where I basically do first impressions of video games that I've played for an hour or two, and I play it live and I talk about the mechanics as I play it. If you're looking for that kind of like background noise content, I think that'll be good for you. But when it comes to reviews, I have multiple reasons for keeping it short, and I think it works for the most part. So thank you very much for your question. The next question comes to us from A Dirty Rumor. Knowing that you were once a developer and having just watched Indie Game the Movie, do you have any thoughts on how the industry on the whole could help out indie developers in realizing their dreams without having to utterly crush their souls in the process? Now, having done indie development and known people who've done it on a much higher level than even I did, it is a very hard thing to do. When I was making games, I was working for very little money, for very long hours, and it was soul-crushing at times. Now, eventually that did pay off for me in some way, but it is a difficult thing to do, and you truly have to be dedicated to the craft. As you've seen now, though, pretty much anyone with a copy of Unity can release a game, and that's starting to cause problems, and maybe I'll get to talk about that later in this Q&A video, but good indie developers need to be supported. This is my view. I've always held the view that, you know, a big publisher like Ubisoft or EA or anyone, Activision, could take a portion of its budget and basically set up a fund where you're an indie developer and you propose to them your idea, and you say, look, this is the game I have, and you know, we think it's cool, and what do you think? And, you know, maybe we can have some money to get this thing off the ground. And the good thing about that is it takes away the financial pressure of being an independent developer. That's the biggest pressure. Time, creativity, all that stuff, the dealing with other people, that stuff's manageable. But when there's no money and you're trying to keep the lights on, that stress is unbearable at times, and it can affect the quality of the final product. So what I'd like for them to do is take a couple of $1 million and hand it out to maybe 5, 6, 10 indie studios that have promising ideas. Go to GDC, go to PAX, look at what people are doing and say, hey, here's 50 grand, go make the game. And if it's good, if it's successful, then they may breed an entirely new genre. If you look at roguelikes, if you look at survival games, those genres were born by indie developers. And you get that creativity by giving people that freedom. And the only real pressure indie studios have is financial. If you take that away, even if just small amounts of money are given, that helps so much, and it allows them to creatively express themselves and to explore new ideas. And that's where innovation comes from. If you want to make money long term, I believe that you should invest in creative talent. You should invest in the people who make video games. And sure, a lot of these ideas will flop and they won't be successful, but some of them will, and they may spark the creation of entirely new genres, which in the long run is good for the industry and good for every publisher's bottom line. Very interesting question, thank you very much. Eerie Forest Studio talks about my previous video where I spoke about how difficult it can be working with people in indie development and things along those lines, and said maybe I just found the wrong people to work with. Now, that's possible, but having spoken to a lot of other independent developers, most of them tend to struggle with the same issues. People get stressed. When there's no money and you're working 16 hours a day, people get stressed and they get angry with each other and they fight for creative control, and you have all kinds of issues. If you're doing this professionally, if you're just doing it as a hobby with friends once or twice a week, it's not a big deal. But when you're working 5, 6, 7 days a week, 16 hours a day for no money, that stresses people out, and people get angry with each other, and then people start to fight for creative control. People have issues. There's all kinds of problems that come from working in a team of people. Unless it's well managed and well funded, you tend to run into issues. So I agree with you. It's possible that all my negative experiences as an indie developer could be attributed to just working with the wrong people, but I very much doubt that, given the fact that I've spoken to lots of people at this point who've worked in the industry, and pretty much all of them agree that it's a horrible experience when it comes to indie development, unless you have loads and loads of money or lots of funding from somewhere and a very well-managed team. You know, if you're sitting on $500,000 and you're making an indie game with your friends, maybe not so stressful. But if you're working for like $200 a week and you're living on welfare and you're trying to get a game out, it can be very stressful indeed. So it really does depend on the support and your financial situation. But video game development is stressful, and if anyone tells you it isn't, they're lying to you. The next question comes to us from John Farrell. Besides gaming, what other hobbies do you enjoy? I absolutely love photography. I really am into photography. I've got a lot of decent camera gear that I invested in over the years. Love photography, love movies, love TV shows. I paint and do art. I used to do art as part of my indie game development stuff, and even prior to that I was doing 3D art and animation, so art's a big passion for me. Recently I've been doing model painting. I've been painting Warhammer figures, so that's kind of my artistic expression at the moment. I play musical instruments. I've got some guitars, a bass guitar, pianos. I've got a ton of varied interests, actually. I'm very much into wrestling at the moment. I listen to lots of different podcasts. I'm very much into astronomy and space science. That's a big passion of mine. Occasionally I go out with a telescope and do some observational stuff. So yeah, I have a ton of different interests and hobbies, man. I think it's important for people to have more than one. I've met people recently through various forums and things like Discord who prioritize gaming primarily as their sole hobby and interest. And they tend to get burnt out on games as a result because, you know, everyone gets sick and tired of things eventually, but because they don't have other outlets for, you know, entertainment, they tend to get a little grumpy. And you might find them posting on certain forums and Reddits and things along those lines and Twitter. And I think those people need to lighten up a little bit, really, and find something else they enjoy. If video games are making you that upset, maybe you shouldn't just be playing video games. Thanks for the question. The next question comes to us from Nirith. What do you do to find indie games, and do you have any method to sort out the trash? Not really. It's very, very painstaking, and it takes a long time to get through all of these games. What I do is I go to the upcoming list on Steam, I go to all upcoming, I click that tab, and I middle click through all of them, open them all up in new tabs, go through them, watch the trailers, read the descriptions, look at the comments that might be there, any announcements relating to the game. And I personally look at it and say, does this look like something someone made in their bedroom in 2 days and then dumped on Steam? Or does it look like something that has potential? And then I add it to a list. And that's as simple as it gets. I add it to a list, I contact the developers, I check for new releases on other platforms like Origin and Uplay, and from other publishers that are publishing independently of any of those storefronts. I check the news. It's a problem, honestly, it's a problem. Finding a consistent, solid list of new releases and then trying to find good things within that new releases list is a big part of my job, and it's very time-consuming and not fun. Now, you know, the idea moving forward with my channel is to try and highlight some of those indie games for you. to try and point out, hey, this game over here is actually really cool and no one's checking it out. So I will be getting to that soon. We've had way too many AAA releases in the first couple of months of this year. I was not expecting this much, and we have Ghost Recon Wildlands coming out next week. But once that stuff's out of the way and we have a bit of a gap, I'm going to get deep into indie games for a little while, because there's going to be a content gap in AAA, and I have a huge backlog of interesting indie games that I want to cover. So expect to see some content like that on my channel coming up. Interesting question, thanks for submitting it. The next question on the list from Patreon, and this is the last question from Patreon supporters this month. From XF42, is spicy food or hot sauce popular in Australia? Do you like hot sauce? If so, what kind? Yeah, hot, spicy food is very popular in Australia because we have a lot of Asian influences, a lot of Indonesian, Malaysian, and Thai food. Hot food is very, very popular in Australia. My favorite kind of hot sauce, however, is sriracha. It's absolutely wonderful. I could put it on anything. I'm Dirk asks, what are your thoughts/expectations for CD Projekt Red's future title, Cyberpunk 2077? Now, I try not to get hyped about video games. I don't think hype's very good for anyone other than publishers, obviously, because it fills their wallets. But for everyone else, I think hype's a bad thing, and I try and keep my expectations low. I think it's important as a reviewer not to get excited about video games. That being said, having played The Witcher 3 and it being now my favorite RPG of all time, I am excited to see what they do next. I'm excited to see what they do outside of the Witcher universe, even though I love the Witcher universe. My only concern is that because they are a small team, and because they are independently funded, this game may end up in development hell for a little while before it comes out, which I would not like to see. And I am also a little concerned about the source material. With the Witcher games, they had a great series of novels to draw from. Now, Cyberpunk is obviously a franchise, and there's a lot of things there that they can draw upon, but I'm not sure it's as in-depth and as detailed as the Witcher series. So, we'll see. But I'm very, very excited, I have to admit. The next question comes to us from Laishan Abbas. I hope that's how I pronounce your name. I'm sorry if it's not. 3 questions. He's greedy. Is English the only language you speak, or do you speak multiple other languages? I only speak English fluently. I did learn some Japanese. I tried to learn some Latin. I learned German when I was at school. I'm bad at all of them. So yeah, I speak English. Which programming languages are you fluent in? C, C++, JavaScript to some degree, HTML, CSS, MySQL, I know a decent amount of C#, Python. The way programming works is this: once you've learned one of the core languages, it's very easy to transition over to other languages. You just need to learn the syntax, really, and then you're good to go. So it may seem like a lot, but really it's not. Final question. Views on gaming laptops. I think they're a waste of money. If you're not traveling all the time, buy a desktop. It's cheaper, it's more powerful, it'll last you longer. I don't know why you would game on a laptop, honestly, unless you're someone who has to travel a lot. And in most people's cases, they don't. So yeah, don't buy a gaming laptop unless you absolutely have to. Next question, Owen Emery. What do you think about the Stanley Parable? I was actually talking to someone on my server about this morning who's never played it before. It's an excellent game. Now, some people wouldn't class it as a game, and I think those people are insane, but whatever. It's an experience. It's on a computer. You use your mouse and keyboard to interact with it. It's first person. You click things, whatever. It's a game. It's a very entertaining experience. I really, really enjoyed it. It's not like something you're going to play for hundreds and hundreds of hours. It's a distraction. It's something you do for a few hours, right? But it's a really cool experience, and I would love to see more things like this in the future. I think the Stanley Parable is an excellent example of a walking simulator or a narrative-driven gameplay experience, or whatever it is you want to call these games. And if you haven't played the Stanley Parable, go pick up the demo, because the demo is obviously free, and it has nothing to do with the main game, and it should give you a good understanding of what you have on offer in the full game. It's a great experience. I recommend everyone try it at least once. The next question comes to us from the Benzie Boy. What do you think about Microsoft's push of Xbox games onto the PC platform, and do you think it'll end up like games for Windows Live? So this is an interesting question. I think Microsoft is doing the right thing in the wrong way. I'm very much in favor of them bringing first-party exclusive titles from the Xbox over to Windows. That makes sense. They own both platforms. It's logical. And it's good to have more games on the PC. I also think they should be supporting the PC because they pretty much own the most popular operating system on the planet, and so it only makes sense for them to support PC gaming. I don't know why they haven't for so long, but whatever. The problem we have is that they're using the Windows Store and that they're using UWP, and there are performance issues and incompatibility issues, and you have to use Windows 10 and all of these caveats. And that's the problem. I think if they just released the games on platforms people actually want to use, like Steam, they would be much more successful. Now, I don't know what their sales figures are, and I would love to know, but I imagine not a lot of people are buying games from the Windows Store. It's a very difficult sell. You're trying to convince people who've been using Steam for like 8+ years to move over to a new platform when they already have like Uplay, and they have the Epic launcher, and they have Origin, and they have all these things, GOG, and now there's another one. And not only is there another one, but it's full of crap that they're not interested in. There's all sorts of shovelware and applications and movies and all sorts of stuff on that platform on the Windows Store that I have no interest in whatsoever, and it's very difficult for me to find the things I'm actually interested in. And then when I do, those games are usually more expensive. They usually don't run as well as they would on Steam using the Win32 API, they're using UWP. There's a lot of problems. But in principle, I'm very much in support of Microsoft's move towards PC gaming, and I hope it continues, and they continue to improve things moving forward. The next question, and the last one I'm going to take today, don't worry if I didn't get to your question this time around, I will get to it in a future video. The last question for today is from Suicide Assassin 6. Is YouTube your only job at the moment? What games have you made yourself, and what do you think of Total Biscuit? Is YouTube your only job at the moment? Yes, it is. I am supported by generous people on Patreon, I'm supported by people using my Green Man Gaming affiliate link, and I'm supported by YouTube ad revenue. I by no means make anywhere near the amount of money that most people make on this platform. I am not rich, I am very much struggling financially, it is not easy, but I'm making enough to pay the bills and to survive just now. It would be nice if I could make a little more, and hopefully we can moving forward, but right now, I'm making just enough to live. So yes, it is my full-time job. What games have you made yourself? Okay, so this is something I don't want to talk about. I've spoken about it before a number of times, and I understand that you probably haven't seen these videos, but I recommend you go back and watch my Q&A video from 2015, I think it was. I explain in detail why I don't talk about this issue. And the final question is, what do you think of Total Biscuit? I think he's an excellent critic. I'm very much in support of most of his views. I don't always support him. I don't always agree with him. But, you know, he did start this whole YouTube criticism thing, and I think you'll find that a lot of people who do this now have been inspired by Total Biscuit in some way. Is he perfect? No. Does he make mistakes? Yes. But so do we all, and overall I think he's an excellent critic. I want to thank you all for your questions this month, and again, if you want to submit questions for next month's video, please leave them below this video in the comments section. If you support me on Patreon, there'll be a post over there for you to leave your comment there, and I will answer those obviously as a priority. As always, thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.